Transpennine Express first class is not the best. In fact, I'd maybe even go so far as to say it's bad, especially if you're travelling as a couple. But for today's solo trip, it was 100% worth paying the upgrade cost. So why the negative view on it, and why do I still think it's worth upgrading despite that? I'll explain all on this 3-hour journey from Newcastle down to Manchester Airport. Let's get going. I was on my way to Manchester Airport for a flight, as I'm sure you'll be very shocked to hear. So that did mean travelling with quite a big suitcase, and I wanted to get to the station in good time to try and make sure I was one of the first on board to find a place for my luggage. And I'd actually travelled with Transpennine less than a week before this journey, going to and from Liverpool in standard class. That was a bit of a disaster, to be honest, that trip. The standard class seat itself is a bit firm, but it's honestly fine. However, the levels of overcrowding was crazy. A noisy, rowdy space full of hen parties, stag do's, and people heading to and from Manchester for Oasis. There were a lot more tickets sold than seats, so the aisles were crowded with people, and then to cap it all off, someone decided to step in front of a train on the way home, resulting in our train terminating at York and finishing the journey off with an expensive Uber ride home. So I decided for today I should book a much earlier train than I actually need just to be safe, even though I'm staying here overnight at an airport hotel before a morning departure. No first class lounge here for Transpennine, but there was a small waiting room at the platform with a few seats with charging ports and a lot of crisps all over the floor. And despite being early, it didn't actually take that long until the train pulled up on the platform. However, as this was the previous service terminating, it did take them a little bit of time to get everything cleaned up. But about 10 minutes before departure, we were let on board and I made sure I was the first on. And I was quite surprised when I first walked in to see no luggage racks available for my case. The first class cabin is set out in a 2-1 configuration, and as I was travelling solo today, I managed to get one of the individual seats on the left hand side here. The seats are a decent bit bigger than what you get in economy, where it's 2-2. There's a power outlet and a USB charger at each seat, and there's a good sized and sturdy table in front of you, even if mine was a little bit dirty. Worth noting as well, mine was in a fixed position, but there are some on the carriage that can be lifted up if you struggle with mobility. Each of the seats had a hook where you could hang a jacket from, and there was a really comfortable headrest. A good amount of legroom was available, which really let me stretch out, but it was a bit limited around the sides because of that pole being there. But definitely enough space for this 3-hour journey today. The seat does also recline, and although it is a slight recline, it's certainly better than what's offered in standard class where there's no recline at all. And it's one of those where you shuffle the seat forward to recline so it doesn't affect the passenger behind you. In terms of storage, there's the overhead space for small bags, and medium-sized cases can fit in the gap between the seats. But of course my case was too big for this, so I ended up leaving it near the door. And as I got settled into my seat, we made an on-time departure, although we wouldn't stay on time. The main things I was noticing when we pulled away is just how much more peaceful it was in this compared to when we were being in standard class. Based on announcements we were hearing, it sounded like standard class was pretty busy again on this train. They were talking about having difficulties getting down the aisles. But in our first class carriage, it was really quiet. Well, with the one exception of one person having a loud business call, but that was only for about the first 10 minutes. After that, it was pretty silent in there, no one even having any conversations. Everyone just sat there with their earphones in. And I was also noticing a lot more padding in the seat. To be honest, it's probably not a train seat I'll be overly complimentary of normally, but I think because I'd just done standard class the week before, I was noticing that this did feel significantly more comfortable than that. So based on those first impressions, I was feeling pretty pleased with myself for booking the first class rather than standard for this one. As we pulled away from our first stop in Durham, the drink and snack trolley came around. And we were also handed the onboard menu for today. I decided to start things off with a gin tonic, and out of the snacks, I had to go for the Tunnocks caramel wafer. But before getting into any of that, I had a quick look through the menu for today. They operate different menus on different routes. This is their coast to coast menu. And reading through the options that they had in here for the lunch, it was looking pretty good. A bit more substantial looking than some of the offerings I've had on other trains in the UK. The train was a bit shaky when I was filming that, so if you want to see the menus, I've got the online version here. Have a pause and have a read through if you want to take a closer look. But once I've made my decision to go for the steak and Newcastle brown ale pie, I decided to crack open the drink, sit back, relax, check out the scenery out the window, and then I decided to put some Netflix on my tablet. The drink and snack did keep me going for a bit, but I was desperate to get the proper meals out, especially after seeing the options and thinking they were looking pretty good. I really should have had more to eat before I left home. Just got a bit too distracted with packing. We were half an hour into the journey before those meal orders were actually taken, and it was a bit of a longer wait then to then get the food. So whilst we're waiting for that to arrive, let's talk a bit more about how this compares to standard class and what on earth I was talking about in the intro about it being bad but still worth it. My experience here in first class is already so much better than what I had in standard class the previous week. It's a huge amount more comfortable, it's more peaceful, and I'm getting buzzed on a gin and tonic, and a pie is on the way. And all of this was just £23 more, so £71 instead of £48. Keep in mind that's booking relatively last minute, and it can be had for a lot cheaper than this. So why did I choose to not book this the previous week? Well, it's all to do with the seat layouts. The seat I'm in today is fantastic as a solo traveller, but I had to try 3 train times before I found one where one of these seats was available. The majority of seats are facing another passenger with a table in the middle, and if you're in these seats the legroom is tiny. Worse still, if you're not travelling solo, you can't actually select to sit in the solo seats, and you have to be on the tables facing other passengers. The previous week I was with my partner Kelly, and because we knew we'd end up at those tables if we booked first class, we ended up not booking it, because although standard was less comfortable, the legroom there when you're not at the table is better than it would have been in first. The only way for us to get comfortable in first class would have been to hope for a quiet train, which wasn't going to happen that weekend, or book separately into the individual seats, which wouldn't have allowed us to talk to each other, and also wouldn't have allowed us to use our rail card. When the food arrived, it looked okay, a little small and unimpressive when it arrived, but it tasted alright. Nothing amazing, just a little underwhelming given my hunger levels and what had been described in the menu. Definitely left me wanting more when that main course was done though. I say main course, but there was no dessert or starter, there was just that snack and then that meal. I had thought that they might come around with the snacks again because it did list that there was some cake and cookies and things like that, but no, it turns out that was only offered right at the start. One thing I did really appreciate though is they didn't leave it too long before they cleared the plate away, and then when they cleared my drink they also proactively offered me another one, which I gladly accepted. I made a quick stop over to the loo, which was fine, but aside from that the rest of the journey was spent relaxing in my seat, and I stayed there until we arrived into Manchester. Now the original plan here was that I would then connect onto an airport train. I had a 20-minute connection time which was looking like it was going to be absolutely fine, but of course this being UK trains we did have a bit of a delay. We were held up in Leeds for a while and we were told that we were going to have to take a slower route avoiding the main line for unspecified reasons initially. Eventually they did tell us it was due to a passenger who'd fallen ill on a different train, and I think that train was just in the way so we're having to go around it. That delay did unfortunately mean though that I was due to miss my onward connection by 1 minute, and the next train after that wasn't until an hour later. I did have some hopes that maybe we would make up the time, but as it turned out the one I was hoping to connect onto was cancelled anyway. So when we did eventually arrive into Manchester Victoria, I ended up just hopping in an Uber instead. I had quite a bit of work I wanted to do once I'd arrived at the airport hotel, so I figured I'd be happy to pay for the convenience of being in my hotel checked in well ahead of when that second train was due to depart an hour later. And the delay repay claim that I'd be able to get would be enough to cover the cost of that Uber. So how was this overall? Well, delays, disruption, underwhelming food, and a seat layout that makes no sense when you're travelling as a couple. But for me today, I'm very glad I paid extra for first class. A comfortable solo seat and a couple of gins made it a relaxing trip. And if you're going to face delays, it's a much better experience to be sat in a more comfortable seat, especially if that cost to upgrade isn't that high. This last week has definitely shaken my faith in using UK trains though. We do seem to have bad luck with delays, but maybe that's not luck though, maybe that's just the standard. But delays do happen everywhere though, even when we were in Japan on the bullet trains we had delays. But if you want to see how that experience compares to UK trains, watch this video next.